And it's a good evening there, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody who's out there on Facebook or YouTube, killing a little time, trying to find a funny segment of an old time story or something to entertain themselves. And it's kind of strange now. As you get older, we start talking about era. Era reflects a time that roughly the year we were born. One nice thing I really enjoy about being retired is walking downtown and meeting people. And you can usually tell by looking at them. Seniors have a gray-haired look and a few wrinkles, and you talk to people, and you stop and talk to them on the street. How are you doing today? And where are you from? And where did you work? And all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of weird. When you meet people that are from the same time slot that we were with, 30s and 40s, we find out that the mindsets are very similar. And by doing that, we see a lot of the times that we meet the same type of people. Of course, they're red blood, and no matter what color their skins are, they're all born in the same era, if they're the same age. So we're talking about things, and some of the things on the farm that we had that were quite different at the time. We didn't know the difference, but we lived in an era when there was no running water. We had water running in the creeks, in the ditches, and the rivers. But it was only the people that had a lot of money that had running water. In most cases, people had wells, or they had a dam. A dam was a scoop out that was built by a tractor or a team of horses and a dredge behind them. They just made the hole in the wall and dug a hole in the ground, basically, and it was left, and then it filled up in the springtime, and eventually, after a couple of years, the dam was full of water. In some cases, the water was drinkable. Of course, in the early days, we weren't watching as closely as what they are now with the health departments, but we survived. Sometimes the water was a little bit murky, but it really settled, and after the spring runoff was there, the water cleared up, and so that meant we had to go out and pack it into a hand with a couple of pails, or we had to take a horse and a wagon, or a team in a wagon, and put a barrel of water, an empty barrel, a gas drum, a 45-gallon drum on the back. And it was either a galvanized one, it didn't rust, and then we would pass pails of water from one person to another until we filled up the water tank, which was an old gas barrel usually, cleaned out. And we hauled it up to the house and siphoned it off into another barrel, and then we put a cover on it, and it would sit there. In some cases, you had to say where rainwater would come off the roof. So we'd have a couple of barrels and a couple of little round pipes coming down off the roof, and the water would run off the roof in a rainstorm and fill the barrels up. And we used that for washing in the house, washing your face and washing your clothes and stuff like that. And then in wintertime, I remember in the cold winters when I was a kid, like living in the Darrow area, just out of Dawson Creek, they didn't even have running water in Dawson Creek in a lot of places. Yeah. Some of the main centers had it, but in a lot of cases there were houses out there that didn't have running water. And they didn't have flush toilets either. They had one of the old two-holers sitting out in the back, a hole dug in the ground with a little shack over the top of it, and you went in there and half froze to death in the wintertime and tried to wipe yourself off with a frozen Eaton's catalog. That was a thrill compared to what we got now. So the era was quite a bit different. And the other thing is we had the Keskatna River. It's about 10 miles out of Dawson Creek, and it was not a big river, but the water there at that time was running, in some places was about 3 feet, 4 feet deep. So what happened, we take the snow off when the ice would form there, people would go out and shovel the snow off, or take a couple of horses out when the ice was thick enough, and push the snow back with a log, drag it with two horses and pull the snow back, and then the ice would thicken. So then my uncle was one of the guys there. They had a little kind of a sleigh, a bobsleigh arrangement, with a saw on the back, and then a hinge, a manual hinge, and there was a gas motor. It was a Model T engine of a car, and it ran this buzzsaw, and he would take it along the ice, let the saw down, and it would cut a great big groove in the ice. So he'd go across the river and cut grooves all the way across, and they'd be about 30 inches square, some 20 to 40 or 30 inches square. And then at one end you'd have to knock a piece of ice out so you could get the ice to break free. And once you got the ice free, then you could take a chisel and you could break the blocks off, and you'd wind up with these ice blocks. They were 2 feet square and about 2 feet thick, or sometimes up to 3 feet thick. And then we'd load those onto the back of a wagon. Now, what usually happened, there was a machine there. It was made out of a car differential, and there were a couple of pieces of timbers up in the air, fastened together. They were bolted together, and there was a slide. So you put this thing down to the river, in the water area, lower it down into the river, and then they would pull a block of ice onto the thing, then raise it up, and then back the team of horses in there with a sleigh, and unload the ice onto the back of the sleigh. And then the people would take the sleigh home, these blocks of ice, and out in the shed behind the house would be a shed, and it would have sawdust in it. So in the mills, you go down and get a load of sawdust. So you'd put your ice in starting in the bottom row, put the ice on about a slab of maybe 6 inches of sawdust, put the ice in there, and then fill it up with sawdust and put it about a foot deep of sawdust over the top, and then another row of ice. And sometimes we would have 4 or 5 rows of ice in a building. And that would sit there all summer, and anytime you wanted a piece of fresh ice, you'd have to go out there and dig the sawdust off and take the ice off and pull it into one of these barrels and move it over to the house and wait till the water thawed out, and we'd have good ice water. And that was our water system. We never had running water. Some of the farmers that had a little bit more money, they would have a big dam above beside their house, and then they would have a little gas motor that pumped the water from the well or from the dam into some. Sometimes there were 45-gallon drums in the house to keep the water from freezing. Be sitting into a kind of a bathroom type thing. So running water was very scarce in the early days. Outside toilets were very popular. Cold as heck in the wintertime. Not what we have now. Warm toilets and inside the house, same temperature as outside. Toilet paper, flush toilets, and a sewer that takes all the stuff away, takes it down to the disposal site. So when you talk to people that are about the same age, we came from the same era, and they all talk about the old days. They all remember the old days with the ice blocks and the ice house and all the outside toilets. And those were the different days. But of course, when you grew up in those days, you didn't know the difference because nobody else had anything different. The odd farmer did, but not unless they had a lot of money. They weren't. They were using horses to pull their plows around. This stuff, my uncle used to have 4 head of horses, and he used to walk behind them off to the side, and they would pull the ditches, the discs, or the cauliflower, the cultivators, or the harrows. Walk out there for hours and hours in the dirt and the hot weather, and it was a hard job. The people that lived in those days knew what hard work was, really hard. Everything was heavy lifting. You had to lift everything by hand. So it's a whole different life. So we really have something to be thankful for. We don't have those manual labor jobs anymore. Everything's done by equipment usually now. So we don't really understand what some of these people went through until you actually go to some of the museums and see some of the equipment that they used to use. So we went through some tough times, but it was good times. People were friendly and they helped each other out. It was anytime a new neighbor moved into an area, sometimes 8 or 10 people would go over there and help them build a house and set up a barn and do stuff like that. It was a gang where people ganged up and helped them because they knew that these people came in and had nothing. So you helped them build buildings, put the buildings together, place to put their animals in, place to put their ice in, place to put the sawdust and the ice. And then we didn't have a refrigerator either. So usually there was a hole. There was an area where there was a hole dug in the ground, maybe 4 or 5 feet deep, 4 or 5 feet in length, 2 or 3 feet wide. And there'd be a little shed built over the top of that, and then it'd be put dirt over the top of that. It was a fruit cellar, a root cellar. So then what we do is put the potatoes and carrots and stuff like that in there to keep them cool in the summertime. So you open the door, it was covered up with dirt, a couple of feet of dirt. So you go walk in there and it's cool, real cool inside. You keep milk cool, keep your vegetables clean, cool so they wouldn't rot. Root cellars and wells and dams. Those were the good old days. They were good times. They were hard work, but it was good. We appreciated everything that we got there. We had to work hard and plant crops and harvest the crops, chop wood, saw down trees and saw up wood to build fires so we could keep warm. Now we turn the thermostat up. So the young people of today don't really understand just what they went through in the early days. It was a good life, and we're happy to be where we're at today, and we're just trying to figure out where our life's purpose is now. I guess the life's purpose for most seniors is to go down and drink some coffee with the rest of the guys and talk about the old days and talk about the good times and also talk about how we're getting older and the people that are good friends are dying off. And our circle of friends are getting smaller. We started out with probably 40 or 50, and now over the years people are dying off, moving away. Sometimes you only have 4 or 5 good people, circle of friends that you know really good, eh? But everybody is a friend. A stranger is a friend you haven't met yet. So have yourself a great evening, and we look forward to seeing you another day. Good night and goodbye.